So this morning I'm with Chris Racher, who is the finance manager of Peterborough United Football Club, which is quite interesting as a football fan. So Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very
Great
much.
to have you here.
Thank you.
I guess I want to kick off an icebreaker question. Let me ask you, how would you rate your Excel skills?
Interesting. I like to think they're pretty good. Use it every day. And yeah, I've always been interested in learning new formulas. There's always a case of someone sort of will come up to me and say, "Oh, is there a way you can do this?" And I like to sort of go away and research how I can do that. So, I want to sort of learn how to do a bit of Power BI as well. More of the automation sort of things you can do. But I mean, a lot of it, like to think I'm pretty good at.
Good. Yeah. I mean, I guess there's such a range of skills, isn't there? From, I can summarize a column into, no, I'm a ninja.
Exactly.
Highly complex. I think the advent of ChatGPT is when I've needed to do something really complicated recently, I just found that mind blowing. It's like, just can rattle off some amazing stuff. Anyway, let's talk about your career. So you're now working at Peterborough United Football Club, which has got a rich history. Tell us a little bit about your kind of role and how you ended up there.
Yeah. So I've worked here for just over a year. And yeah, my sort of career, I finished my A-levels. I didn't go to university. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And essentially I sort of, started working full time, and it was sort of my dad that ended up saying, "Well, have you tried accounting?"
Interesting.
She knows someone at work who's doing AET, and I was always good at maths. I'd always had an interest in maths. Started doing business at A level and did fairly well in that. And the two sort of mixed, so it was my dad, that sort of said, right, well, why don't you give that a go? So, I sort of got to the end of my A levels, and as I say, I sort of knew that I didn't want to go to university, and I didn't want to be in a classroom as such. So, I wanted to get out to work and sort of build a career. So, started AAT, and I wasn't working in finance then either. So, I was working for a manufacturing company, and as soon as I sort of started AET, I sort of knew, right, this is for me. I've naturally took a liking to it. Studying in the evenings at home, at weekends, didn't feel like a chore, and started to rattle through some of the exams. And essentially got my first job in finance for Mick George, who are the Peterborough United sponsors, and have been for a long time. So I got my first job in finance, and again, working with other finance professionals, sort of my first job, at first you're not really too sure. You sort of think, have I made the right decision here?
I've got an office job.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's very different. You're going into a classic 9 to 5. And have I made the right decision? I've decided not to go to university. Sort of doing an on-the-job training. I'm paying to do my own qualifications. But in all honesty, I knew I made the right decision. I took a real liking to it. Studying, as I say, in the evenings and weekends didn't feel like a chore. And I really enjoyed it.
Great stuff. I mean, do you think from the people that you've worked with in finance, a lot of people arrive at the same kind of destiny as you in the sense of, I don't know, I mean, funny enough, when I was at school, I did think I wanted to be an accountant and ended up doing some accountancy kind of work experience, and it put me off. But do you think a lot of people actually kind of arrive at it through a similar choice to you in this sense of, it's something that evolves? Certainly some of the people I've met along the way, it was an evolution rather than a kind of revolution type of thing.
I think I definitely agree. I think that, when you're younger, no one really looks at an accountant and it's this,
unless the family are all accountants. Or
exactly. And I think unless, you've got friends or family that are accountants, you don't see it on adverts or and think, oh wow, that's really what I want to do. So, I think lots of people I've met, and I think this is a thing for me, is you don't have to be a genius in maths to be an accountant either.
No one's asking you to add up on your in your head, are they? I mean, we've got
exactly. Yeah, and I think for me, because I didn't come from an audit or practice background, I very much started in a business, understanding the finance of how one business runs. Not necessarily focused on statutory accounting, which, if some people looked into it and thought, wow, working for a practice and having a look at statutory accounting, can be quite daunting. I came from a business background and really, really, really took to it. And that's sort of why I've got to where I am, because started studying AAT and then started studying SEMA. So I think people either know people that do it, or they, it's a mixture of business, economics, finance, where you start studying those things at A levels, where actually you think, well, that might be for me.
Yeah. I mean, interesting you mentioned economics there. I mean, I'm a big football fan. I'm fascinated by the disparity between the Premiership, and then I've been following Wrexham on their Disney Plus program, and you guys are in the same league as Wrexham. So I guess really we should talk about the kind of the cost aspects of working inside the finance of a football club. I mean, in terms of income, I mean, you've got your gate receipts, I guess there's food and beverage and stuff like that. And you've then got this weirdness of, player transfers and things like that. But talk to us about how you found that when you came to the club from your previous role, which seems to be completely different.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very different. And when I first started, having a look at all the numbers behind some of these, I found fascinating, and took, even now, I'm having a look at some of the sell-on fees, all of the instalments for player transfers, and it's fascinating. It's you have the day-to-day operations of the football club, where you're speaking to maintenance, marketing, and commercial, and then you have this whole other side to it where you're dealing with player transfers and huge costs. And I've supported and loved football all my life. So when you really see the behind the scenes and you get into it, it's fascinating.
Yeah, somebody who also watched Ted Lasso as well. We'd like to think it's as charming as that, but I'm guessing it's not. I had a quick read of the profile of your chairman. See, he's been around for quite a while, hasn't he? Since 2007 or something. So
yes,
I guess everybody needs an active chairman who's passionate about the club. Yeah. There was something. So locally, we've got Bristol City up the road, who are. Somebody described it on a podcast as the most boring team in the football league, and I think this comes down to cost control, because their chairman is one of the Hargreaves Lansdowne, so he's probably a very, very astute businessman, and I guess that whole player transfer thing massively impacts where you're going to finish in the league. And I think it's on the Wrexham programme. For those who haven't watched it, I think it was Rob was saying, or one of them was saying that it's effectively 10 million per league to get from. They went from the National League to League Two, and League Two to now in League One with you guys. And they reckon it's 10 million to get to the Championship, and then 100 million to get from the Championship to the Premiership. Those were the kind of exact words they said. That's just phenomenal, isn't it? I mean, and it's like, and you've got some people with deep pockets in the league as well, haven't you? Birmingham City got a very wealthy benefactor, and also Wrexham as well, which we talked about. So that's interesting, isn't it, for kind of competition and working in that environment?
I know, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges is, how can you get around these such big stages? You don't want to get to a place where, the 3 teams promoted are then the 3 teams relegated the following season, because you can't keep up and you can't compete. So I mean, when you have a look at the league this season, you can see how well that Wrexham and Birmingham are doing, and it's sort of no surprise really that if you were to benchmark these teams in terms of spending, the biggest spenders often are your top 6. So it's really difficult. I mean, for Peterborough United, our sort of model is that we like to develop the academy. The academy really come through. You've got players which we've then sold on to Premier League teams. You've got Harrison Burrows, who's gone on to Sheffield. Obviously, Ivan Toney started out here. So our sort of model of really developing academy players, and Harrison Burrows came from the academy. We've got Ricky J. Jones, who's now playing and having a fantastic season. He came from the academy. We like to develop young players, turn them into League One and Championship players, who can then go on and play, in the Premier League. Sammy Schmodik's another one.
So that's that's an example of a very good business model of sustainability, isn't it?
Exactly.
There was a point in lockdown where software developers were acting like rock stars, and it's not going to be long now before they start getting transfer fees. But it was a real challenge actually, and we made a conscious decision to try and bring some academy players in the developer world and nurture them, and it's been a really good investment. And that's kind of, I guess, being mid-table is actually, it might be frustrating from the fans' perspective because they want you to be up there, but from a business perspective, sorry guys, you also want us to survive year in, year out, and we can't go mad.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those where, and there's a greater focus, especially around all of the PSR rules. We have something in the EFL called the salary cap, where, you see year on year where they're trying to make it more sustainable, because turnover might increase by 10, 20, 30%. But actually, a lot of the player wages are going up by 40, 50%. So, how can we operate in a sustainable model? But how can we still compete? With the likes of Wrexham and Birmingham, and it's very challenging. Especially for us, we're in a very old stadium as well, so we are developing that. And we have only last week opened our new Posh store as well. So the size of the Posh store is about 3 or 4 times bigger than our previous store. And, we've had record numbers on opening. So that's something we're very excited about. But it's things like that.
What your family getting for Christmas this year then?
Well, a posh golf towel and various things like that. Yeah. we've had new lines of accessories, and they do like some of the gifts that we can get from them.
I mean, I guess from our perspective as Zahara, we're all about helping people to control costs. I mean, obviously, football club, it's going to be the players; they're your biggest expense. But have you been surprised by any of the other costs that you've seen coming into the kind of nominal codes or general ledger, thinking, my God, I never thought about that?
Yeah, and I think the thing is you can get wrapped up in all of the player costs and all of the spending on football, on travel, and all these things. But actually, if that makes up 60%, you've still got a large chunk of all these other costs, and a lot of that for me is the operational day-to-day running. We've got 2 sites. We've got a stadium and a training ground.
Yeah.
The operational cost of running those is huge. Our electricity bills, our people costs, and for me, when I first started, my background is around reporting, automation, and a greater cost control over what people are managing. And that was one of my main things for when I came in, is having a look at the setup. And actually, if you broke it right down into everyone's departments, everyone's divisions, we want to categorize and see every single spend from £1, to £10,000, and who is responsible for every transaction. And for me, and why I like this role so much, and why I think accountants and management accountants especially are so important in a business, is because we should be able to collect all that data and give every department a story as to how their department is running. And being able to tell that story to any person in the business, I think, is why our role is so key. And that's, for me, is why I enjoy it so much. But yeah, I mean, some of those costs are why Zahara has been so useful, and something we need so much. Being able to give live budgeting features to budget holders, giving approval over spends, because the thing is I think without these systems, you can have transactions going through which will just sit as an overhead. We know that we need it and it's happening, but then it gets lost. And I think that's the key thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good insight that you're sort of, giving us there. And I guess Manchester United have been going through this, haven't they? I think Jim Ratcliffe probably would like you working there at the moment, because as businesses get bigger, the pressures get larger, don't they? And trying to get a grip on costs. And it's interesting what you say, that 60% of the costs are kind of flashy, showcasey costs that everyone would think about, but it's the other 40% is possibly the bit that could make a big difference or a dent on the bottom line. And also, like what you're saying there about giving each department a story to tell about, how they spent their money or why they can't spend any money, that type of thing. Exactly. I don't think enough people do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we've now switched accounts packages. We've introduced Zahara. Everyone now has, a very good oversight of, this is my division, this is my department. These are all of my income transactions. These are all of the things I'm spending on. And actually, things which have been happening maybe for the last 10 years, they're now saying, oh, well, I'm responsible for that, am I? And it's like, yes, that's now your cost. And now they're looking at thinking, well, actually, if in the last 3 months we've made a loss of this much in my department, right, well, how can I work on that? So actually this cost that, has just sort of been going through for the last 5 years, I'm going to review that. Have we got contract for that? Can we have a look in the market and see who else is offering this? And, that piece for me has been really interesting over the last year, to say, every cost that has come through, someone has to be responsible for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have to go through that approval process. And, we've used Zahara to use the workflows to say, over certain spends, they have to go to these people. We're giving people the authority to make their own decision and their own spends of this much. And yeah, it's that story of, how does it link to our objectives as a club? How does it link to the strategy of the club? We want as many bums on seats as possible. We want a younger fan base coming in. We know we're going to be spending X amount on marketing, on, reduced tickets to get those younger families in. And, how can we use this reporting to then support that?
So what are the numbers like for a League One club in terms of the amount of people that you need to employ to run a club like that? How many have you got on the payroll?
That's the thing. So, where cash and resources are tight, I think we could always have more. In finance, there's 3 of us.
Right.
In other League One clubs, I know that, they've got 9 or 10 people in finance. They might have a head of finance, 3 management accountants, and then, accounts assistants all sort of running the numbers. Yeah. And this is where, with the introduction of Xero and Zahara, we want a lot of those numbers and a lot of those reports sort of automated, and all trying to get the sort of systems doing it for us. So there's less reliance on people. But yeah, you've got your stewards, turnstiles, your back office staff, you've got the academy. So you're looking, around 250 to 300 people at the club. So, yeah.
And in terms of not specifically, but give me a kind of idea of the sort of turnover, you can do it to the nearest 5 million if you like, that you would expect a League One club to be turning over with their gate receipts, sponsorships, and things like that. So we get an idea of the kind of what we're talking about size of business wise.
Yeah, so I mean, we hope to turn over at least 10 million every single year, and sort of going back to what we were saying before is, our funding that if you go into the Championship, you then get X amount more funding from the EFL. And as you can imagine, then if you get into the Premier League, there's a huge jump in that. And then even if you're relegated, then you get some solidarity payments from it. But yeah, I mean, the numbers are staggering because we talk about being sustainable, having control over our costs, trying to get as much gate receipts in as possible. Our stadium seats 13,000 on an average. It's 8 to 9,000 a week. So all of our strategies and our objectives are about how can we increase that.
Yeah.
And
I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's the one thing that impressed me with Bristol City, and they got a fantastic stadium, and they know how to sweat that asset in terms of, I think they got the rugby on alternate weekends. I went and saw Take That there in the summer, which was fantastic. So it's kind of, I think that they're exceptional in this. And the reason I mentioned that they're so close to us here in Bath, it's next city along, but that's I think a 20,000 seater stadium, but they do make it really enjoyable. It's kind of like there's an area for the hardcore fans, there's an area for the away fans, but the kind of other stands are very safe, very family oriented. And I guess that's the thing about gate receipts, isn't it? You've got to make it enjoyable. It can't just be about hardcore nutters who want to kind of, shout and holler and things like that. You've got to bring the families in, I guess, and make it affordable for them as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we've really sort of targeted that. We've got a fairly newish stand, and it's called the GHD, the GH display stand. That is fairly new. And it seats about 4,000. We then have the family stand, very much targeted for families. If you can bring your kids, and that's how we then get that generation of fans then up and coming through, and then they might take their families. And but then we've got London Road, for our season ticket holders that want to scream and shout. Absolutely, go there.
Yeah.
So
a man needs an outlet. You mentioned Xero is your finance system. What were you using prior to that?
So we're using Sage 50.
Okay.
And I've used Sage 50 in previous roles. It definitely has a place, and is very good transactional wise. It's just the reporting for me. I had to move from Sage because of the reporting.
Yeah, and you get the ecosystem with Xero, don't you? Like any other cloud-based thing, so you can plug in the likes of us. But it kind of, there's an app for that type of thing, isn't there? Which I guess, is your job is to try and bring in the suite of tools that just make your life better and easier. And Sage have definitely upped their game in the last couple of years, I think. But there's a clunkiness of Sage 50 which just seems a little bit. My dad used it in the 80s, for goodness sake. So it's kind of like,
yeah, exactly.
so it's kind of, it has its place, but it's there's other things. Do you think has Xero got any limitations for you? I mean, it's kind of, we have this conversation all the time, that for us, the line items are everything. The amount of fields on the line item, impacts your reporting, and you've got a couple of tracking categories there. Is that enough for what you need at this stage? Or do you think you'll be stretched again at some point?
Yeah, I mean, it's perfect for where we are now. Because, as I say, we've integrated with Zahara. Our payment collections are automated. Our invoice reminders are automated. There's so much automation in there, which has saved so much time. And yeah, Sage have upped their game. They've got bank feeds. They've certainly tried to introduce some of the AI features in there, but it's the clunkiness of it. I mean, our downtime with it was not great either. So the fact that Xero's cloud-based, we can access it from anywhere is a huge positive.
I don't think anyone needs to spend any time rebuilding indexes, do they, on their Sage database? So as you say, it has a place. I mean, it's fascinating where things are going at the moment. I don't know. For us, 2024 has been a very unusual year. I think we've been greatly impacted by. I think was it Winston Churchill said, "Events, dear boy, events," or something like that. We didn't need an election in the summer. Followed by the football, followed by a horrible budget.
Yeah.
I guess everybody like us is scrutinising costs. I think that the payroll tax that got increased is going to be a big issue for people. But in terms of you in finances, what do you think is going to influence your role over? I mean, obviously AI, but are there any other things on the horizon that you're looking at, thinking, "Wow, we need to be on top of that," or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there about the budget. So the employers' NI hike, that's going to affect us hugely.
Yeah.
So that's an extra 250,000 on our payroll. So that's that alone, and that's why for me, using Zahara and having a real management of over every cost is so key. All of our contracts, that we upload to Zahara, that we approve, if we can save 10 grand here and 10 grand there, at the end of the year, all of a sudden you've saved £400,000 because your usage is less, your contracts are better, you're using better suppliers, where our systems are better. So
it's
that's
frightening, isn't it? I mean, it's just. I got Jonathan, our FD, to calculate out what it's going to cost us, and I think he came out at 18,000. You're 250,000. It's like, oh my goodness me! And it's
I know.
And it kind of worries the life out of me for things like hospitality. I wrote a piece yesterday, like my end of year review, and I think the hospitality aspects with the national minimum wage is another sort of real issue. I don't think. Well, I absolutely know there's nobody in this current government who's got any business acumen whatsoever, and I don't think that with this sweep of a hand, they truly understood what they were doing to the business community and how desperately affected we all are from this.
And I think for me, it's one of those that it's a great way where if you hike the national minimum wage, that's another thing where I can see why it's great for a lot of people, but then you sort of have this disparity where the people closest to those suddenly, unless you are going to increase everybody's by that certain percentage, then it can have a real ripple effect. So the hike in national minimum wage, along with the hike in employers' NI, it's massive costs, and for a business like us, where we have to manage every cost very delicately, we're not making millions of pounds in profit, and
I think the other key thing for you guys is that, a business like Zahara could say, okay, well, we need to innovate. We need to up our game on marketing. We need to get more leads. We need to sell more subscriptions. If we could, we would. It takes an awful lot of machinery to do that. But you guys, what can you do to suddenly increase your income by 250 grand a year? We're like, well, we just have to put our tickets up. Well, that has an impact, doesn't it? So it's, you've got your mechanisms for income, and it's not as though you can just turn a dial and change it. And there's so many businesses like that where, you just can't just suddenly adapt to 250 grand. You'd probably normally look to where can we find that cost saving?
Exactly, and it's one of those. If we up our prices, then we're passing that on to the fans, and it's way. We have to find ways of always trying to increase our income. And as I say, one of the great things that we've done recently is obviously the new Posh store. So it's a great bit of investment. But there's only so much we can do as obviously a football club.
I think that's the key
in ways to do that. And one of the great ways is having a great FA Cup run.
Yes.
So these cup runs are so crucial. So obviously when they scrapped replays, there was a big uproar from the lower league teams because, if you got the replay back at Old Trafford, that's huge gate receipts that you would then benefit from. So there are a few ways, but unless you're out there on the pitch, it can be quite difficult.
I was checking live score this morning. You're in the FA Cup still, aren't you? You got through the second round, is that right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And we've got Everton away. So I've got Everton away. So it's an unbelievable draw for us. I think back in 2017 we had Chelsea. We have had Man City in past seasons at Posh. But yeah, so we've got Everton away. Unfortunately, it's been scheduled for a Thursday night. So very difficult for fans in Peterborough to get down to Everton on a Thursday night. But we're still very excited about the tie.
So will you get gate receipts money, do you, from Everton, that they give you a share of that?
Yeah, so the way the FA Cup works is that you get 45% of the gate. So so both teams will split it, and you get 45% each.
Hence why Premiership Stadium is like 45% of that. That's nice.
Exactly, absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing, it's always great to host a Premier League team. But, I mean, ultimately, if you can go to the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea, Everton, and have thousands and thousands of people there and get those gate receipts, it's massive. It's massive for us. So,
am I right in thinking I'm a Chelsea fan all my life? Did Chelsea give Peterborough something? I remember there was one team we played in the lower leagues, and there was some sort of really nice gift that Chelsea gave them. I forget what it was.
That vaguely rings a bell. I think with AFC Wimbledon, they I'm not sure if it was through flooding, but they had to repair their pitch, and I don't know. It might have been flooding or a sinkhole or something like that. And I think it might have been Newcastle. I think they offered to give AFC Wimbledon then their share of the gate, and there's great things you can do with that. If a Premier League decides to then give a portion of their gate. But I think they did with Wimbledon. So
yeah, it must be amazing for the club when they suddenly get the superstars rocking in, from the Premier League, because we were watching all Match of the Day and things like that, and they are, to some people they're gods, aren't they? But when you see them down on the pitch, they're just getting on. They just happen to be very consistent.
Yeah, that's the thing, and you sort of forget they're just normal people. They just and it's similar to when I first started. If seeing the players walk through the office and be like, wow, that's. But then as time goes on, you're like, oh yeah, that's just it's a player.
You can't be in awe of them because you work in finance, and
that's the thing. Yeah, and and we have many people walk through reception and that sort of come up to hospitality as well, and in the director's box, and have you got to get into the have you been into the director's box and sat there with the hoi polloi? You
were a fan down on the terraces.
Yeah. I sort of like to do a bit of a mixture. So when we went to Wembley and won in the final in the BSM Trophy, was sat in Club Wembley. So that was fantastic. That was a fantastic experience. And I think there was about 40,000 people there that day. So that was fantastic. I like to do a mixture. My partner comes to every game, which is great to watch with her. Showed Phil Parkinson up to up to the hospitality section. Yeah, so
he of Wrexham fame.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's an ounce. You have to be professional in these in the role. But one of my sort of highlights, I think, which is quite strange, which you never really think about happening. So I think we just finished a league game. Come sort of down, and a few people leave right before the end of the match. So sort of come down. We've got a TV in reception. So start watching some of the Premier League highlights. They're showing the goals, and they've got Sky Sports News on. And down comes Howard Webb. Howard Webb comes down and just stands in reception, and then starts asking me about some of the games, and then we start chatting about the goals, and then and then all of a sudden I'm thinking I'm having a chat with Howard Webb. So so that's always interesting.
Yeah. In terms of you and kind of career aspirations, where do you see your career going over the next few years? Almost, it's obvious you're thoroughly enjoying working here at Peterborough, which is fantastic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, say, and it's something, I speak to various people about. I didn't go to university, and some people love university, and is a great way, of going through your career. And then, but yeah, I mean, for me, I found something I love and I enjoy. And if you can mix that with a hobby or your interest, for me, that's your winning. That's sort of the winning recipe.
Absolutely.
And I've been at Peterborough for just over a year. And I mean, you mentioned Ted Lasso, but funnily enough, working here very much reminds me of Ted Lasso.
Oh, good.
Very family orientated, behind the scenes. Everyone's asking everyone how their families are, and everyone's socialising with each other. You all sort of hang out together. You speak about anything and everything. I know how every department sort of works. Play golf with commercial. It's a fantastic place to work. For me, I love working in football. And my aspiration, is to take finance here to the next level.
Excellent. Well, I've really enjoyed chatting to you. It's kind of, I think we've covered some really good ground there, which is interesting for anyone who wants to listen to this. And I think the fact that you're working for, such a nice club as well with such a rich history, as I say, it's clear that you're enjoying it. So, which is fantastic. And you said a few nice things about Sahara as well. So thanks for that. So look, thank you for joining me on the recording. It's really good. And, I hope you have a great end to the year and a really, long cup run as well, and brings in as much money as possible.